Welcome to New Realities. I'm Alan Steinfeld. I'm here with Guy Vantresca and Aurelius Electrum, an alchemist, modern-day alchemist, and of course Guy is well-versed in history, but alternative history, it's not just...
Well, let's say the unconventional.
The unconventional history, ancient history, but today's show is the beginning of a series about Montauk and time travel and the Montauk experiment. Behind us here is the Montauk antenna, where if you go down to Montauk, Camp Hero, that strange-looking thing is still there. So let's do a little overview. What happened at Montauk? Yeah.
Well, people should understand that there is the conventional history of, let's say, the 20th century, especially World War II, that they learned in school. And then there's the the untold. Now, Oliver Stone did a recent 10-part documentary series on Showtime called The Untold History of the United States. Yeah. And in that, he covered some of the things.
But he doesn't mention Montauk.
No.
Or the Philadelphia experiment, which is, of course, related to Montauk.
Right.
Well, I have to say Montauk's a modern-day myth. I mean, what really happened? Did something happen? What? And, of course, it's related to the Philadelphia experiment where supposedly Tesla and Einstein and other people made this ship disappear.
Well, that's what we can get into.
Let's get into it.
Of course, the U.S. Navy disavows all knowledge of any of these projects.
Like most things.
But the point is, we know that there were atomic energy experimentations and programs during the war and after the war. Okay. And there was an entire national security state built around intelligence operations and military operations that didn't just disappear when the war was over. Mm-hmm. So this whole apparatus, whether it's the Pentagon or the NSA or the CIA, continued to operate during the Cold War.
Okay.
And the only thing Oliver Stone talked about is the development of the nuclear bomb and the real reason Japan was bombed, as opposed to what we're told in school.
Right. They bombed Japan so they could try out their new toy, right? I mean, that's what he says in that show.
And to scare Russia.
And to scare Russia.
Because Russia was prepared to invade Japan, and we wanted Japan to surrender. But the reason Japan really surrendered is because they knew the Russian army and navy were about to invade Japan.
Oh. But isn't there some sadistic element of like saying, oh, how is this new bomb going to work on people? That's what I got from
there's a bit of a racist element that the Americans wanted to test it on the yellow race or the Asian race versus...
I think they just wanted to test it. How is it going to work on people?
Yes, and on a whole city.
It was awful. But anyway, so behind that's what we see as history, but behind that there's a secret history.
Right. So when you start experimenting with splitting atoms and doing all sorts of fission experiments, you're touching into, and maybe you can touch on this too, sure. You're talking about the space-time continuum. You're cutting through the veil or opening the veil between dimensions.
Well, talk about that a little bit.
So essentially that is causing a rift. Like everything in time and space, the time-space continuum as we picture it with Einstein in that it's like fabric of time is kind of an elastic and it can be manipulated and molded. And part of what this nuclear fission process is doing is that. And this ties into the whole concept of dark matter and the black hole theories and things
let me just
astrophysicists are talking about.
Translate everything that has mass is making a dent within time-space matrix.
Right.
The heavier the mass,
gravity.
the more dent it makes in time-space and creating gravity. Gravity is affected by time, affects time and space. So the greater the mass, the more distortion in the field. And supposedly in Montauk, they created something that really distorted the field.
Right.
Well,
so again, there's no historical record of this, so we're dealing with eyewitness testimony of a number of survivors of these projects. And actually their stories don't all coincide, so you have to take things with a grain of salt.
So what happened according to your research?
All right, so the Philadelphia experiment was in the summer of 1943. The Navy wanted warships to be invisible to radar. And they brought Tesla in, and Einstein, I believe, was involved in an advisory capacity, but not directly. But Tesla was the one who set up the electronic transmitters to pulse the ship, the USS Eldridge, which was a destroyer, in the Philadelphia Navy Harbor, and hit it with a lot of electromagnetic beams. And he was successful in making the ship invisible.
Now, there's no now you're getting this from where? Because there's no documented history of this.
There's no official history, but
where'd you get this information from?
From reading the stories of Al Bielek, Duncan Cameron, Stewart and
Peter Moon
and
Preston Nichols wrote the books, the Philadelphia.
And they're all very suspicious characters. No, but they're great people. I know them. I know them.
But if you put it in context of all the secret technology projects that the U.S. was engaged in during the war and after, it makes sense.
So Tesla technology bombarded the Eldridge, and then...
Okay, so the ship was invisible to radar, mission successful, accomplished. Then the Navy said, we would like to make the ship not only invisible, but disappear.
Okay.
Two different things.
How do they know it was successful in just making it invisible?
Because the ship was on radar, and then it wasn't.
Oh, just invisible to radar.
Yeah, but also invisible to the human eye.
To the human eye. And that technology started out, this was a combination of the Tesla technology. They were creating what are known as the delta T antenna. It's an octahedral shape that has an XYZ axis, and it got adapted as we know it today. It's all the HARPS project. Up in Alaska is using a modern version of this delta T.
We can talk about HARP as
well. We will, but is this antenna related to it?
No, this is what's called a SAGE radar.
What does that do?
And basically what it was used for is long distance scanning out into the ocean so they could see ships or planes coming in.
So it didn't have any higher technology.
Right, and this idea of over the horizon, it could only see to the horizon, but this over the horizon technology is what evolved out of this whole project.
And that's where chemtrails come in.
Okay.
But on the surface, Camp Hero is part of the coastal defense system of the United States.
Camp Hero is where the Montauk experiment took place. So go back to Philadelphia.
All right. So the ship was invisible. You could still actually walk up and knock on it because its mass was still there. It was invisible to the human eye and invisible to radar. So then the Navy said, well, okay, can we make the ship disappear so that you can't actually hit it with your hand if you walk up to it.
Right, it's gone.
And Tesla said, that's going to be very dangerous. I don't want to be involved because the power is going to be so enormous it could damage the ship and harm the lives of the men.
Because there are people on it. It's not just why...
It's a crew. There's a full crew on the ship.
Why did they do it with a crew on the... Well, who knows why they do things.
Again, why do they experiment on radiation with civilian people?
Well, I guess they didn't know.
Why did they inject...
Yeah.
There's so many.
No, I know. Yeah. So they did it with a full crew on the Eldridge.
Yes, in 1943.
And if people look up the Eldridge on, Wikipedia, what will they find?
They'll find everything I've told you is actually on the Wikipedia page.
Okay.
There were 2 experiments.
Yeah.
And but the page also says this is unsubstantiated, this is not documented. The Navy refuses to acknowledge.
What does the Navy say about the Eldridge? If you
that it was never involved in the experiment, that it was deployed somewhere else.
Oh, I see. Okay, so they do the second experiment.
And the second experiment makes the ship disappear.
Okay.
And I don't know if Tesla walked away and someone else came on board.
Yeah, it's kind of vague, that part.
Yeah. Right. But there was apparently a scientist who was willing to amp up the volume, came on board, did it, the ship disappeared.
And the story is it appeared
at the Norfolk Naval Station in Virginia immediately.
Oh, I thought it appeared in
No, that's another thing. That's another
thing. It appeared in Norfolk.
Norfolk, and then went back to Philadelphia, and when it came back, the clock was 10 minutes earlier than when it left.
So it appeared, why did it appear in Norfolk? Was there
it wasn't like they programmed a time machine and said, go to this point.
But it did time travel and space travel.
Right. And the crew, the reason they know it landed in Norfolk is there was another ship on the harbor and witnessed its appearance. I forgot the name of that ship, but that's in the Wikipedia page.
Oh, it is?
Yes.
Montauk, Philadelphia.
If you do the Philadelphia experiment.
So it appears in Norfolk for a few minutes and then reappears back in
Philadelphia. However, when it reappeared, parts of the ship were misaligned, and sailors were actually embedded in the superstructure of the ship.
If they were moving during that process.
Right.
Oh,
because of the density of the metal would have been so much more that when it reappeared, all it would take is a slight displacement of how the people moved through the time and the space, and where the ship was, and that slightly off, and then people were actually embedded, so the story goes, in the hull of the ship.
And supposedly our friend now Bielik
and his brother Duncan Cameron
jumped off the ship.
Right. As the ship reappeared, they felt something really strange going on, so they dived off into the water and saved themselves.
While people like Preston Nichols from a previous incarnation, this is where we get a little non-scientific, was stuck in the hull of the ship.
Yeah.
But anyway, so what happened? How does Montauk connect in with that project? Because supposedly I heard when that ship disappeared, it appeared 40 years in the future at Montauk.
Not the Eldridge. A different ship.
Oh, it wasn't the Eldridge?
No.
That appeared? Oh, I thought it was the Eldridge.
Maybe you can fill
What
in.
happened?
Well, this apparently when they realized where the ship went, and what they talk about in the books is that it went into a zero time. And the zero time is side of a sidereal time that can be accessed on this 20-year cycle. It's sort of similar to a skip in time that they can access it to. So they waited till 1963 and they recreated the experiment, but something had gone wrong and they didn't actually connect with the ship at that point. So that experiment failed, and then so they had to wait another 20 years until 1983, where the experiment took place at Montauk.
So wait, there was a 20-year time-space cycle that is looping around that they had to catch up to.
They could access into this zero time where the ship always
43, 63, 83.
Yes.
Because what's happening in that 20-year cycle?
Well, apparently, again, I'm substantiated. Montauk, because of its location, and there was a submarine base underneath. So there's a legitimate military base on top, on the surface.
Right, and people can go there and actually see the remnants of that military base.
And there are artillery batteries built in bunkers that were designed for coastal defense. Okay. And then after the war, the radar stations were added to detect Soviet missiles coming to the eastern seaboard. And then there are actually in Sandy Hook, New Jersey, which is a state park, there are all these Nike missile sites which are connected to the Montauk radar stations.
Oh, I see.
So the idea is the forward radar detects the missiles, sends messages to the Nike Herc anti-surface-to-air missiles, and they would go up and knock out the Soviet missiles.
But let's go back. So in '63 they did the experiment again. What experiment?
Attempting to connect to the zero time space where the USS Eldridge would have been in this zero time.
In the zero time in Norfolk or somewhere else?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
And then they did do that, and then in '83
they successfully connected from Montauk into this zero
Montauk
time.
Being like a portal itself, would you say?
Because they'd recreated that Delta T antenna underground in a large scale, which connected directly to the SAGE radar dish we have here behind
this one.
us. Yes. And so that Delta T antenna had what was called the Montauk chair. And that's where the driver, essentially.
The Montauk chair, where our friend Duncan was. Now talk about Duncan's involvement in all this. I know it gets weird, but I have a weird audience.
Right. Okay. So apparently in Montauk there were two major experiments. One was around time travel,
which is possible.
Right.
Okay.
And the other was again, apparently the United States had acquired from Nazi Germany something called the bell, the Nazi bell.
Oh, I didn't know about that.
Yeah, there was a Waffen SS colonel named Hans Kammler, who was in charge of all these secret projects that were not the Werner von Braun rocket-related projects, but were separate. So he was apparently involved in the Nazi nuclear weapon program.
Okay.
And this time travel device, this bell. And the bell was acquired by the United States and brought to Montauk.
Yeah, Joseph Farrell's done a lot of excellent work.
Joseph Farrell, I know, I want to interview him. So what was the Montauk bell?
It was a device that could, let's say, work like the Star Trek transporter.
Really?
In a crude fashion. very crude
fashion.
The Nazis developed, but then they modified it in Montauk.
They tried to make it work because it never really worked for the Nazis. Everyone who went in it was just turned into strawberry jam.
So then the person turned into strawberry jam?
I mean, I'm an
It
wasn't
yeah. I was a tank commander. I put everything in those terms.
You were a tank commander?
Yeah.
Where were you a tank commander?
For 6 years in Germany for the U.S. Army.
But after World War II, unless you've time traveled.
It was after World
After
War
the
II.
Nazis.
Right. But inside of a tank, it's a chamber. It's a steel chamber, and oftentimes, if there's a concussive effect of an artillery shell or anything hitting the tank, the tank will stop the shell from penetrating, but you'll be concussed to death.
Oh.
And your body parts could turn into jam.
Oh.
And
but anyway.
Sorry, that's a...
No. We can get to that. But no, getting back to the bell and the chair, what happened then in Montauk?
They were separate. The chair was separate from the bell.
Okay. And then what... But before I go... But before I go there, can you talk about how time travel is possible?
So what this delta T antenna was supposedly doing was creating an XYZ axis and it was a steerable waveform. So when you look at a radiating antenna, it radiates an antenna field and it has a particular shape around it and it covers a certain area. The precision control that you have with the delta T antenna is you can steer that, and that's why they use it in HARP, because they can actually modulate waveforms in the upper atmosphere, and they can create lenses and create the aurora borealis as sort of a side effect, and they do all this.
And they do that with chemtrails and...
Well, that's a separate thing.
Okay.
Yeah. But later on, the chemtrails were incorporated into HARP when they discovered they could create a canvas for HARP to paint on. But that wasn't the original purpose of chemtrails.
No, but in Montauk, we have the chair and we have the bell. And then what happened with the technology? How did that happen?
Well, there was a big accident.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And everything got moved to Area 51.
No. What happened though? Just slow down a little bit.
Well, some of the stories that came out of that were they realized when they put somebody in the chair, they needed somebody who was very empathetic, somebody who could really feel, almost had psychic powers, clairvoyant type people, and people who really had a real emotional connection to their feelings. And so they would put people in the chair, and they realized that they could amplify their thoughts and project them out to the SAGE radar antenna here.
This one,
and what they do is they turn it around and point it back on the town of Montauk, spin it literally around 180 degrees, and they would say things in their mind like, everybody in town go to the corner store
and buy a Coca-Cola.
And the whole town would be milling around the parking lot, and nobody had any real idea why they were there. That
antenna would amplify the thoughts of the people.
The controller in the chair.
And control...
And affect the minds of the people that it was...
So there was one guy in the chair, like our friend Duncan. He would say, someone would say, concentrate on the thoughts. That antenna would project out to the town, and people would then be mind controlled.
Yes.
And remember, the mind control experiments of the CIA are documented. We know they existed. We know about MK Ultra. Those were real programs. So this makes sense when put in context of those other things.
But then how did the bell fit into this?
From what I've heard, again, it's hard to say, the bell was such a crude device, they never really got it to work.
Okay, what did they want it to do?
I think there's a different side to that story, too, where after Germany had broken up after World War II, part of that technology came here, but another part of the technology went down to Argentina.
Oh.
And then there's this whole story of the German influence in Argentina and some of the first cold fusion experiments being done. And there's a small island in the middle of this lake in the mountains in Argentina where they had reconstructed the bell.
Do you know about that?
Vaguely, yeah.
Oh, they reconstructed the bell. So now, but you said something about the new area, the old Area 51 with the old technologies was...
Well, because all this, Montauk is a civilian area. There's towns around, there's a lot of people.
It's a state park.
Right,
Yeah.
and also they needed, they were drawing electricity from the regular grid, and they were blacking out areas.
Oh,
so then after a certain accident or two, they realized we should really move this to a place where we're isolated, there's no civilians, we have our own power source, and Area 51 had just been being built.
But before we get to Area 51,
Right.
there was the Montauk chair incident.
Right, and there's
That,
a legend
Yeah,
of
yeah.
Junior.
Yeah, what happened?
When they started,
this is all legend,
right.
but
It's going to be like Hellboy, that movie Hellboy.
Yeah, there's a 2012 connection there too,
There
because
is?
what
Yeah.
they were doing was they were projecting forward in time from the chair, and they were trying to do it'd be something similar to remote viewing.
oh, wait. So instead of just mind controlling people through the antenna, they were
They
trying
could
to
do-
project their thoughts into
To
the
see
future,
the future.
with that
Yes.
delta square antenna, and
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And they realized that every time they could only go so far into the future, again this is 1983, but as soon as they got to the year 2012, they would hit a wall.
That's interesting.
And they saw this giant iron horse at what they considered this wall, and they couldn't
Was
break.
that at 2012, or is
Yeah,
that
at
like
2012.
thousands of years in the future? I thought
they
the
could,
Iron Horse.
They could only look to that part. Oh, I'm not totally clear. The stories are.
What happened?
I
No,
don't
it-
know. I'm thinking of Troy, but it's another story.
No, it wasn't the
Right.
Trojan horse.
Yeah,
No.
yeah.
But there was something that Duncan, who was sitting in the chair, Duncan Cameron, could only
Right.
go so far
Yeah.
into the
and
future.
2012 had a part to do with that, but later they had overcome that at some point.
And then he went way into the future, right?
And apparently when he came back, an entity attached itself to his
Came
his
back
trail
with
That's
it.
what happened.
and entered our time space using the portal that Duncan had opened to return home.
And that entity then, that being, creature, started to destroy.
Well, when it entered, there was a giant explosion. There was a lot of the people inside the laboratory died, and
Which laboratory?
the one where the chair is contained underground.
Where is the chair in Montauk? But where? Is it
Under-
right under that
the
thing?
ta- yeah,
under
right
the
underneath that.
Oh,
greater.
I didn't
According-
know that's where the chair was.
According to Duncan, yeah.
Yeah.
The chair must still be there.
Well, the whole place is sealed up. It's
Yeah.
an underground laboratory that was
Because-
sealed up.
So there was a chair. So Duncan's in the chair. He's hooked up, probably electrodes. He's having thoughts, and he's like gone into the future with his mind and body. Did he time travel physically?
No. As far as I know, his body
Yeah,
remained.
yeah, his body remained,
I
but
don't
he was
know,
still
maybe he's-
capable of doing things on
And
the
seeing
other side.
things.
Yes.
So he goes into the future beyond 2012, or maybe at 20, and then this monster comes back with him
Right.
and starts to destroy
And gets
everything.
Well, not
Unleashed on the base, and it was
Yeah.
physically like it looked like a Sasquatch or something like that.
And it's huge, though.
Yeah,
But they
huge.
called it Junior.
Yeah.
Why'd they call it Junior?
It's like calling a monster tiny. I don't know.
Yeah.
And then how long did that monster exist? Because then they have to then disconnect everything to make it dissolve.
I think there was a mass evacuation in an order
Right.
to shut down the base.
But then what happened to Junior? Is he
He
still
may still
roaming?
be
He
roaming
may-
the
No,
hills.
what
of
I heard from
Montauk.
Preston was
Right.
they had to disconnect all the wiring that amplified the energy that created, and then
Well,
Shut
and then
down
it
the power.
dissolved.
That was
Yeah.
also part of how they shut down that connection with the USS Eldridge as well. When they had skipped forward into time and came into that 1983 experiment, they had to cut the power systems in order to shut down the experiment as it connected back into the.
Wait, so in 1943 to 83, when it reappeared in 83,
Yeah.
they had to cut the juice at Montauk so it could.
Yeah. Now these stories all crisscross, and it's interesting that when we're dealing with time and time travel, and you interview these different
Right.
people that were in it, they all sort of have a slightly
own time.
parallel thing, but the stories
What-
intermesh and
What's the
distort
year
in
for the
this way.
Montauk Chair Monster?
Incident?
Incident. Yeah, what's about? About
That was
80?
Would have been in the 80s.
Yeah, it would
83
be the early
maybe.
80s, yeah.
Probably around the
Yeah.
83 time.
Yeah.
So Duncan was there in the 80s. We'll get Duncan on this show because he's like a big piece of.
Yeah.
So okay, so we had that weird stuff. So now coming up to the future,
Right.
where does it give us? Does it give us? Did that stuff get transferred to Area 51 and time travel technology or what?
Well, the story I've heard
Yeah.
is that they abandoned the bell, not in concept, but the actual physical bell, and they tried to develop
The
again,
teleportation bell.
Yes, and so when I say there's this above top secret program that existed in Area 51, based on the testimony of some of the participants who release information anonymously.
Okay, and of course there's Bob Lazar and the UFO, but we're not getting to UFOs yet, but it might be related.
Yes. It's part of the hemispheric defense for the Earth against intrusions from outer space.
Okay, so what's happening now with this technology? I mean, that was, 83, but the 40, if they could do that in 43...
Yeah.
Did they develop a Mars jumping program, which I doubt? I mean, what do you think?
Well, there's stories that there's different places, and I think there's a big project in Australia, and this jump concept of they actually are opening, it's like a Stargate or a time door that you can actually jump gate that they can just jump through and
your
go to
physical, not just your etheric body, but your whole physical being.
Well, there's been portal sites. In the south of France, there's a bunch of portal sites.
Mesopotamia,
which is some people say why we had the Iraq War. There's a place in Oregon called the Oregon Vortex, which really does feel strange. Actually, I was in the south of France with a woman named Patrice Chaplin, and there's 11 portal sites, and the last one is at the top of Mount Kenegu, where someone actually went through, didn't they, Roger, and had not such a great, was killed because they were not prepared to go through the portal, is what I get from that.
It's not an entertainment ride.
No, you have to be prepared like an alchemist.
Right.
So what do we do with all this? So, okay, it's besides it being a sort of modern myth and may or may not be true, it's fascinating, but then what? So what? We definitely have chemtrails. We have a HARP thing.
The funny thing is the Air Force has now admitted, HARP has always existed, but we're shutting it down because we don't need it anymore.
What was they say HARP was for? To control the weather?
In the patents, literally, it was mentioned in the patents for that.
Whose patents? Tesla's?
No, it wasn't Tesla's. It was a modern inventor. And Nick Baggage did a lot of work in his book. Angels Don't Play This Harp.
Right.
He goes into great detail and has the patents in there, and it's actually mentioned that
he can explain
be
a lot
used
of this.
for that.
Well, there's chemtrail. What's the chemtrail connection?
So chemtrail, as far as I can tell, there are three purposes of the chemtrail. The idea was started by the father of the H-bomb, Edward Teller.
Oh, really?
This is documented. It was his idea when they, towards the end of his life, they discovered the hole in the ozone layer above Antarctica. And this is way before global warming.
Okay. Or they knew probably global warming was existing or starting to.
But Teller had the idea if we could release certain aerosols with metals into the atmosphere, they would coalesce around and fill the hole in the ozone layer. And there was a scientist who actually did the computer modeling to prove if the idea would work or not. And I forgot his name, but he's recently come out and given an interview where he said, I'm essentially not the father of chemtrails, but one of the chief architects of its implementation.
And so what is it really doing, though? Is that what they're doing, or is there other, because people...
Well, if the Earth is losing its ability to reflect the sun's heat because of the deterioration, not just of the ozone, but of the entire atmosphere, outer atmosphere, conceptually it makes some sense to artificially create a new layer around the Earth.
But some people say it's actually not a good thing.
Geoengineering.
No, it's not, because it has serious effects on the weather.
And on people.
And on people, because all those aerosols don't stay in the atmosphere, they fall back to the Earth.
Oh.
We're really messing with something we don't understand.
There's
they
aluminum.
Call it geoengineering, right? And if you look at the whole concept of global warming, in my opinion, we've had global warming since the last ice age. I mean, it's
a natural phenomenon.
It's a natural phenomenon. The Earth goes through stages of cooling and heating.
You have tons and tons
done a lot of impact.
of gas, of artificial, carbon monoxide. And
but the Earth goes through these heat-cold cycles without human industry.
I know, but we are probably affecting human industry.
We're making it worse.
Yeah.
But
without a doubt, we're making a lot of
probable primary cause of global warming and climate crisis is the sun and the Earth's reaction to the sun. The secondary is human activity.
Well, a good illustration of that is there's global warming on the other planets right now.
Right. They say Jupiter's getting hotter and other. And Nassim talked about that. And actually, Jupiter might even be a mini sun. It emits more energy than it takes in, so...
It's big enough.
Yeah. But just getting back to time travel, if it's true, Montauk, where that time travel, that was like 70 years ago. Where's that technology now, the time travel technology?
Well, now we're getting into speculation because if these are active programs, and they're involved in transporting people and devices into space to affect certain missions, whatever those missions are. Some people say, like Independence Day, there's an actual threat of an alien invasion. I don't know.
I think they're already here.
Yeah, but it depends which race you're talking about. Then these devices could be used to knock out. Well, why don't we keep it practical? Meteor and asteroid fragments are approaching the Earth.
Sure.
And they have to be broken up or diverted, or otherwise they're going to penetrate the atmosphere and cause a tsunami and wipe out civilization. If these devices can be teleported, like a laser or some type of rail gun with a laser weapon,
to divert
or to break up a rock.
You mean these time travel devices, or these what devices?
Sure, if we could connect with the orbit of that particular meteorite that was coming, transport a nuclear bomb onto the side of it, and then explode it before it comes to the Earth's atmosphere.
Right.
Well, do you know David Anderson? Have you looked into his work?
Yeah.
Oh, you should hear my interview with him, because he talks about the whole time, how we're actually can make mini time travel machines. He did the grandfather experiment with a plant that he sent a plant into the future. He killed the grandfather of the plant, brought that plant back, and had different DNA. Means that he affected
the future.
And that we split, this is how I see it, into a different parallel time-space dimension.
Right.
Every time.
Which could explain the various ages of the Earth and the real age of humanity.
And mathematically, his name doesn't come to me off the tip of my tongue, but they've been shown that it's one theory of this parallel time, that every time a major decision is made,
the many-universe theory.
The multi-universe theory, it splits, and it kind of fits in with that whole
the quantum physics, anytime any decision's made, the universe splits.
Right,
but I don't know if I believe the whole Schrodinger cat thing, but it does leave us with.
But I like the meteor asteroid thing, because those are serious threats. They're real. They're practical. And if you can affect their orbit or break them into smaller fragments, then the atmosphere does the rest.
Well, what Anderson says is, though, the next wars will be time wars, time travel wars. That's what he says, and that may already be happening. We already may be in another parallel universe that we don't know. Anyway, thanks, guys.
Sure.
Any want to wrap up? Anything about Montauk future?
Well, for anyone listening to this who has this feeling of helplessness that the world is out of control and and they can't influence it, I think that the best hope for all of us is for people to raise their individual consciousness, to practice some type of mindful meditation. Raise your consciousness beyond the ego mind, beyond the intelligent mind, and your life will improve. And if we can improve individually, then we improve in small groups, then larger groups, and then we can affect
the ripple effect that goes.
Do you think so?
Yeah, absolutely. That's the whole concept of, like Christ consciousness and those kind of things you hear about. It's doing it through your individual self.
Yeah.
Instead of trying to influence others on your opinions or whatever. Come to terms internally.
And I'll just throw out the Einsteinian theory that as light, as a particle approaches the speed of light, time actually stops. So as we approach, increase our light frequency, whatever that means, we start to affect the time-space continuum within our own powerful consciousness.
Yeah.
Because the truth is, we are, really super beings. We have unlimited potential as human beings.
Including healing.
And we're just scratching the surface.
And the other is more spiritual qualities, that we actually live outside of time-space, that we are just passengers in this time-space vehicle. And we're beyond it in a sense, but we're playing in it. We're here to play.
Yeah, definitely.
That's why we're here.
But you have to play with your own integrity. Find your integrity, use your intuition to find your essence and live through that.
Yeah, and help lift up the planet.
Well,
yes.
And I expose the secrets. Anyway, thanks. I'm here talking. Aurelius Electrum and Guy Vantresca, an old friend, and New Reality. So let me know what you think about that.